Hi, friends. It's Kris Vallotton here, and I'm excited to tell you about my brand new book, Just Stand: What to Do When You Want to Give Up. It releases September 16th, and I wrote it for anyone who feels like life has hit you harder than you can ever imagine, and maybe you're in the middle of a storm that just won't let up right now. Maybe you're tired of pretending that you're okay. Well, I've been there. I want to help you find peace that doesn't depend on your circumstances. Just Stand isn't just theory. It is raw. It is honest. It's filled with hard-won truths that I've learned through breakdowns, burnouts, and finally breakthroughs. If you feel like you can barely hang on, this book is actually for you. There is hope. You're not alone, and you were made to stand. Grab a copy of it, and let's stand together. Hi, welcome to the Cultural Catalyst, where we teach you how to live fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. I'm your host, Kris Vallotton, and today I have a very special guest. Her name is Kallie Fell. Thank you so much for being on, Kallie. And we actually have never met before this moment, but you have quite a reputation. And Kallie, you are the executive director of the Center for Bioethics and Culture, and you're prenatal nurse, right?
Perinatal nurse, that's right.
Perinatal. I'm sorry. I knew I wasn't going to get that right. I don't think I've heard that phrase before. Okay, so first of all, tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be the executive director of the Center of Bioethics and Culture, where you're in San Francisco, so right in the middle, I'd say right in the middle of God's country and also right in the middle of the beast, right? Both.
That's right. We are in the belly of the beast. It is no coincidence, I think, that our organization operates out of the wild, wild west of the fertility industry, and we are a safe haven for those who are trying to transition medically. We are a safe state for youth who are undergoing gender transition. It's no coincidence. But yes, I am the executive director of a nonprofit, educational nonprofit here in the Bay Area. We do have a global impact, though. But yes, our home and our heart is right here in California, educating folks, whether that's lawmakers or academics or just people watching TV, about bioethics and why it affects everything we do and why we should be asking questions about some of these technologies that we've seen come down the pipeline for the last 50 years.
Have you ever connected with Dr. Andre Van Maal from our world?
Yes, we have. Actually, he was featured in our very first film, the Center for Bioethics and Culture. We have 11 original documentary films. We find that film is one way to educate. As one of my good friends used to say, I'll watch a film, but I don't know that I'm going to read a book. Everyone's got, an hour or so to watch a documentary film and to educate themselves. So it's a great way of teaching people and telling stories. But he was actually in one of our films. I believe it was Transmission, What's the Rush to Reassign Gender? That was our first film.
That was your film. Okay, I've seen part of that film. That's cool. And then the change movement is led by two of my friends. You might know Ken Williams.
I have met
Elizabeth Wanning.
Yes, I believe I have met them actually. I want to say in DC at some point.
Probably in DC, yep.
I have met them and maybe even here in San Francisco, but I do believe I've met them in DC.
That's beautiful. So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you end up in this arena?
Yeah, it's kind of twisted, but I would say providential. But my journey began in the sciences. I earned a master's degree in animal science, specifically in reproductive physiology and molecular biology.
Oh my God.
And then, yeah, I'm a little bit of a brain, a little bit of a little nerd, science nerd.
I went to What's the Matter You, so you're going to have to explain some of the terms to me. I'm looking at my my directory here, and I'm like, I can't even pronounce some of these words that you've made a career out of. So you'll have to
Yeah.
forgive me.
Well, basically, I was a kid in undergrad who didn't know what she wanted to do. And I stumbled in a class that was all about reproductive medicine, right? Like
Yeah.
male and female reproductive system, which is a very interesting thing to be enamored with. But here I am. And I was just really enamored with male and female reproduction, specifically at the time in animal science, because a little interesting fact, some animals, endangered animals, won't reproduce in captivity. They will only reproduce in the wild, which is really challenging when you're trying to help animals populate. And
Yes.
so that was kind of the stick for me. It was like, I was really interested, like, wow, that's crazy. And ovulation, depending on the species, can vary greatly. And so anyway, I was just like really enamored with this topic. And so I pursued a graduate degree in it. And then went on to work in women's health in Nashville, Tennessee, looking at preterm birth and endometriosis, which are two conditions that are really understudied. Women's health really in general is understudied, but
Really?
yeah. And so went on to study that, but started to really have questions about the technologies. I worked in animal models. And so I was, cloning and doing IVF in animal models and doing research on epigenetics. But I knew that we were, doing IVF with humans. I knew that embryo selection and testing were down the pipeline. I knew of these technologies, and I started to really wonder, are these okay? Like, even though it's
Yeah.
available, should we be
Yeah.
doing this? And so I started to ask people, and I was really alarmed by the amount of people who had no answers, who were just kind of like, well, it's family building, it's good, it's available, so why not? Or people who are just really just even unwilling to engage in me with those questions that I had. And for a while, I tabled them. Like I said, went on to work in women's health. Then I decided to make a switch. I wanted to be more clinical, and so I went back to school to become a nurse. Again, focused in women's health, perinatal nursing. So that's antepartum, labor and delivery, and then postpartum period. And again, those questions just kept kind of surfacing. And during my education and during all of this, I was invited to a conference with another woman, and in Indiana, actually. And
India. Wow.
Indiana, sorry.
Oh,
So I was in
Indiana.
Tennessee.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in Tennessee, and then invited me to this conference in Indiana. I said, sure, why not? And she actually had to leave because of a family emergency. And I was honestly prepared to leave as well, because I'm not kind of the person that wants to hang out at a conference by myself. But I was thumbing through, and I still have it to this day. I was thumbing through the program of different talks and people workshops, and I came across the Center for Bioethics and Culture, and its founder at the time, the president and founder. Now she's just founder and board member and dear friend. Jennifer Law was talking, and I mean, right there. And I still have the book. I have the excerpt. She was asking hard questions, and she was bold. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is someone who's not just talking about this, but helping people understand it, educating. And so I went to her workshop, bought all the DVDs, soaked it all in. And like I said, at the time I was living in Tennessee, and I knew she was in California. My boyfriend was living in California, so I flew out a couple of times to some events. I just really got on board, and I was like, wow, this is an organization that I really want to be a part of. And so I started, again, through another providential events, I moved out to California and started volunteering, just writing, helping in any way that I could. And then I came on board fully as our research kind of assistant and writer. And then started helping co-produce and co-write and co-direct some documentary films. When I came on, we had just released the film Big Fertility, which is a story of Kelly Martinez, who was harmed through 3 surrogacy journeys.
He was harmed through what now? Explain that to
3
me.
surrogacy journeys.
Okay. Yes.
So she was a surrogate mother carrying a child for someone else.
Yes.
And at the time, we had already had 4 or 5 films in that space. And I was like, so wishing I could have been here for that. But instead, we actually, that's about the time that this gender debate, and we can get into what that is, kind of emerged at the time of the COVID outbreak. And so I got to kind of join Jennifer and co-produce and direct these films, these 3 films on gender affirming care, transition medicine. And then since then became the executive director, and now I'm leading the organization. So now it's really come full circle. I know that's a very long-winded answer, but from a graduate student who is really asking these questions to an executive director who gets to make content, the program director of the Paul Ramsey Institute, which is our initiative to help educate students. Now I get to do that. I get to be the person who helps them ask questions and helps people answer those questions as well. So it's been awesome.
That's really incredible. Well, I have tons of questions, and I have honest questions that are not just for, because you're, I'm supposed to be the interviewer, but let's talk a little bit about the whole transgender thing, because that's something that I've kind of been in the middle of that with Moral Revolution and of course the change movement. I'm a father to those guys, and Dr. Van Maal is a very close friend of mine. So and then we see what's happening with the Trump administration, reversing so many of those laws that, in my mind, really put children at risk. I think probably put everyone at risk. I mean, I think adults too. I'm not wise enough in the science areas to know that, but especially put children at risk.
Sure.
Please speak to that.
What child knows? I have my daughter, she's just learning, she's 3. She's just learning what a boy and girl is. She points out someone and says, is that a boy or girl? She's just learning about male and female. And, some days, she has this pretend play, right? Like they're a pirate, or they're a ballerina, or they're a frog, or they're a cat. And so it is really, really, I'm really grateful for what this administration has done already in this space.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And
especially in this space.
Yeah.
Especially in this space.
Yes. We, as an organization, I'm going to be a little bit honest. At the beginning of this, when we first were kind of seeing this kind of tidal wave of tsunami, it seemed like overwhelming. All of a sudden, it was in culture and media and everywhere about people transitioning, whether that's adults or children. We kind of wanted to avoid it because it was like cancel culture was huge. And
exactly.
We're like, well, what role do we really have to play in this? Like, we were kind of watching from afar. And then we found out that children, before being offered puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones or surgery, they were being offered fertility preservation. And we were like, oh no. Okay, now you've crossed the line. Like, now we have got to enter in this space. Like, no child can consent to this. No child knows what kind of family they want to have at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is absolutely ridiculous. And so that's when we came out with the first film, Transmission, Let's Rush to Reassign Gender, and kind of went from there. But yeah, absolutely. It was, and I think, don't quote me on this, I do believe it was Dr. Van Maal who said, in the first film at the end where he says, I believe the tides will change, or it will take lawsuits, or it will do all this. Yep. But he basically predicts the future, so to speak. Like, it's just really cool to see now, again, that we've come so far from 2021. There was a lot of damage in the process, but I think we're on a path to hopefully correct this.
Yeah, I wrote a book called Moral Revolution 18 years ago. And, that was back before there was the, quote, gay movement, the LGBTQ movement, really. And there's one paragraph in there about homosexuality. So this book is about sex and about healthy sexuality and teaching young people about sexuality. And it has one paragraph about homosexuality. So this shows you the extent of what's happened to culture in 20 years. I mean, just 20 years, right? And I mean, if you wrote a book on sexuality now, and you didn't have chapters on homosexuality and transgenderism and gender identity and all that, you don't have a book that's even relevant to culture, right?
Right.
And so it's challenging and troubling what's happened. But I had an encounter with the Lord. This is probably 12 years ago. And I had this open vision of people on television advertisements like we see now. If you took this medication and you have these symptoms, call this number, and these class action lawsuits. And I saw this open vision of television commercials of people of this man saying, if you transgendered, if you were da 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 da, call this number.
Yeah.
And and so I've said to Andre for 15 years, there's going to be mass lawsuits. And I think we haven't even begun to see what I saw in that vision many years ago, because I think that now, we're seeing the fruit of, kids who were transgendered who are now becoming adults, who are speaking up and saying, my psychologist talked me into this, my doctor talked me into this, and then many of them have what's been done is irreversible, right? And so speak to that, because I know you're an expert in this whole area.
Yeah. I think when we first created the film as well, and like I said, the first film, Transmission, What's the Rush to Reassign Gender, we kind of looked this like wide view. We interviewed parents of children who were transitioning or who had stopped. We interviewed pediatricians and experts like Dr. Van Mol and Dr. Van Meter, pediatricians. We interviewed people in academia, in science. We were kind of all over. And we also interviewed detransitioners, adults who had decided to detransition. And for anyone listening who doesn't know what that means, I think most people know what that means now, but that's someone who started down the medical path to transition, to make themselves appear more of the opposite sex. So whether that's puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, meaning if I'm a female, I'm going to take higher doses of testosterone, and then maybe top and bottom surgery, what they call it, which is really just irreversible double mastectomy, and then maybe the addition of breasts, or the phalloplasty or orchectomy, where you're removing like the testicles or penis and then adding a hole that would be like a vagina. So you've started down that process and then you've stopped for whatever reason. And some people who detransition, they'll like reverse course. Many don't. And you were talking about just like lawsuits. There's really not a space for this type of medical care. Insurance isn't paying for, one of our gals in our film had the double mastectomy, and insurance won't pay for her to have that back. Right, to get breasts put, implants restored. And they don't know, medical providers don't know how to code the care that they're providing for detransitioners. And so this is a really, if you're listening and you're in this space, like, we need great medical care for this population that's increasing. Totally. And when we did that film, Transmission, What's the Rush to Reassign Gender, we had this like aha moment talking to, I think we only had 2 detransitioners in the film. And we were like, they're the voice. That's the voice we need to hear from. Because at the time in 2021, again, cancel culture, pandemic, we didn't really hear from them. They were vilified. They were silenced. Their own doctors were not happy that they were changing course. They were online,
and social media was killing them.
Massacre, right? Like silencing them, kicking them off. Yeah, exactly. I mean, Megan Murphy got off of X for saying a male is not a female, like just ridiculous. And so detransitioners, we were like, we need them to tell their story, and we want to help them do that. And so then we came really quickly with Detransition Diaries, Saving Our Sisters, which is about 3 young women who I alluded to. One of them had the top surgery, and they realized that doing all this didn't solve their problems. If anything, it created more problems. Yes. And so we came out with that film, and that film was really very well received. And it's so great because, I think we just sometimes have a protection over our organization because, each time we thought, this is it, our YouTube channel's going down, like nothing. And we just got really overwhelmingly positive feedback. People wanted to hear these stories. And at the time, then we were approached by Ignatius Press, and they asked us to turn the film into a book. And so we started writing for that book. And then we heard from parents, hey, wait a second, you forgot about young men. There's a whole, other side of this. You've got the young women. Where exactly. are our men? What's causing them to transition or detransition? And so we were like, okay, we're creating the 3rd film in the trilogy. And so we did The Lost Boys, Searching for Manhood. And we follow, I think, 5 young men in their journey through just really medical hell and back. And then publish the book, which includes many of the stories in the film plus more, and then also kind of guides readers through where did this even start? Where was the origins in this? And where medicine has lost its way? And then why is this risky and harmful to our young children? And so, yeah, I'm really grateful because since then we've seen the lawsuits, we've seen detransitioners finally get a voice. We have research, we have platforms, websites dedicated to those populations of people. We had an epic detransition day, detransition awareness day in DC this year. It was put on by Jen Speck, but we were co-sponsors of the event, and it was awesome. It was amazing. And so huge successes for this administration and for young people and for women in this space, because we are also gaining our rights back too, because this goes beyond that into women's rights and children's, men and females sports and yada, yada, yada.
And parents' rights, if I could say that.
Yes, exactly. Right? Yes.
Parents' rights, because it's getting so strange that you actually, if you look at the way the structure works in California, at least, and I think some other liberal states, it's like actually the government owns your children and you're like the steward of them. And the government gets to make a decision on what's best for your children, which is, I mean, obviously this has so many tentacles to it that it's actually bizarre. It's actually bizarre that your children can actually get an abortion without your permission. They can't take aspirin without your permission, but it's asinine. It's
really scary. It's scary for parents.
Really scary.
It's really scary.
And then, parents are told, when they finally do find out that their kid wants to transition or whatever, their teenager, hopefully teenager even, because this is before teens even, right? And if you don't let this happen, your teen's likely to commit suicide, and they're actually manipulated, and I think it's witchcraft, but they're manipulated into agreeing to do this because it's better to have a transgender kid than have a dead kid, right? This is the argument. This is insanity.
It is insanity. And we've debunked that, right? Like that myth of suicide. Would you rather have a live son or a dead daughter kind of has been debunked, thankfully. But yeah, I can't believe, I think someday people are going to look back in history books and be like, what the heck happened from, this time period? And at least I hope so. And it's really scary as now a parent in the San Francisco Bay Area. Several times I've looked at my husband, while I'm doing the work that I do. And I'm like, I think it's time should we leave? But I'm like, someone's asked to stay here and fight. And we have wonderful now people like Erin Friday. She is, in the Bay Area, or actually, I'm not quite sure if she's in the Bay Area, but she's in California, Erin Friday. She's amazing. And she, she is a legal expert in this, as a lawyer. And so if you're a parent and you're struggling with that, I encourage you to look up Erin Friday, because she's an amazing resource. And if you're interested in if you're listening and you're in California and you're like, this doesn't impact me, it does, because the laws that we are voting for, and that's part of my job too, in this space, in any space, is to kind of educate people on the laws and the language of it, and to also give written testimony, oral testimony to our lawmakers to vote no when we need to and vote yes when we need to. Mostly it's vote no. But Erin does an excellent job on her social media of explaining to parents, why certain laws are important and what rights they're trying to take away from parents and what sneaky things they're up to. And so if you're in California, we need your help. And she's, like I said, a great resource for people to look up and to really understand what's at stake.
We just have a few minutes. I'd like to just go back to the transgender issue for a minute.
Yeah.
Because I in your research, for many parents who are being affected by this, and for even adults who are thinking about transgendering, and of course for any child that might be hearing this podcast, what are you finding the medical risks are? What is the reality of transgendering a child, or even transgendering an adult? But let's talk first for a minute about the risk of transgendering children, because I want to make sure that anybody who listens to this understands that this is really risky business.
Yeah. So it's going to be different for males and females because of once you're on cross-sex hormones or wrong sex hormones, it's different. But it's great. And I don't want to say medical professionals, but they are medical professionals who support the transitioning of children will say that all of these effects are reversible, right? That you can change course at any time. And that is not true. So first of all, if you block puberty is a time of development, not just of gonads and the reproductive system, but of everything, your brain, everything. Our hormones that are controlled by our reproductive system and our endocrine system are vital. And this time of puberty is inescapable. It's developmentally vital. And so
you don't get it back either. You don't get that.
You don't get it back.
Yeah.
You don't get it back. And there are so many resources out if you can just like find, and they list these risks in a very easy way based on like age and what but the other thing is that experts will say you can go on puberty blockers. This will just pause puberty until your child is ready to decide. Well, the vast majority, over 90% of children who are put on puberty blockers will go on to take cross-sex hormones. So this isn't a pause to decide. This is really just the first, actually, it's not the first step. I would say it's the second step. So I'm going to go back. The first step is really social transitioning. It kind of goes to your point, Kris, about losing parental control. In the classroom, maybe your child's going by a different name, different pronouns. The parents may or may not be aware. So that's really the first step, is like this social transition. And to that, I would say, if you have a little boy who likes to wear dresses, goodness, let them. He is still a little boy. That does not change the way that his body was designed or made or created. If my little girl wants to play with trucks, I'm going to let her. She hates bows. That's okay with me. She's still a girl. And I think we need to start pushing back on this. That little boys and little girls can like and do different things, but that does not change their biology one iota, not one bit.
Absolutely right.
Right. So I just think parents need to affirm the truth of their children's biology, but also affirm their interests. If they like dancing or baking or typically female thing, that's okay. But I'm digressing away from your question. And so first step, social transition, which has its damages, because then, and now with the advent of social media, kids can go online and figure out the words to say, where to go once they start social transitioning, to start puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. If they're young enough to start puberty blockers, like I said, that has vast complications, risks involved, because again, you're delaying and you're harming a huge step you're harming the developmental process of a young person.
Yeah, you can't decide I'll go through puberty at 25.
Right. It doesn't.
It's not open to you. It's past.
Right. And some of these, like I think of Jazz Jennings, for example, who's, been the very public face of all of this. They still very much, even though they're beyond now the age of what would be puberty, they're still very adolescent looking, right? They have underdeveloped testes, underdeveloped gonads. Their voice levels are different. And those are just some superficial things. Infertility is huge. This can cause long-lasting effects on reproductive functioning later. One of those being the ability to orgasm, have enjoyment during sex, that is lost. And children are giving that up. And then once they start, after puberty blockers, maybe the cross-sex hormones, that can have huge implications, especially on a female body, such as osteoporosis younger in life, mental disability, mental disease, stroke. The implications are really vast for these levels of hormones.
I know that.
And physicians might say, oh, well, this is a normal amount of testosterone. Yeah, for a male body, or, a normal amount of estrogen for a female body, but it is not for the opposite. And then And then the next step from there would be the irreversible surgeries, and they really are. And when I was creating these films, I would literally have to like take a pause from my research of like looking up images of where they'll take a skin graft from the arm to create what would be a penis. When and if you do, I would encourage your listeners to go watch the films, but in specifically The Lost Boys Searching for Manhood, my husband like had a hard time watching because hearing these men talk about the irreversible damage
Yeah.
to their bodies, the pain of going to the bathroom, the pain of having to dilate, the pain, the mental anguish, all of this, like, brace yourself because it's intense. And so these aren't just simple things. These have long-reaching, far-reaching repercussions and risks and concerns.
What we'll do is we'll jump on and do some of our own research and we can. I'm kind of talking to my team right now. We'll make sure that we put in the chat line some of these different resources, because there are many resources for parents out there. You're listening to this. You're listening to Kallie, and she actually is an expert in this area. We'll cite these different websites so that so that you can talk intelligently to your children and to your doctor, to maybe your child's psychologist or psychiatrist, so that when you walk into their office, that you are educated, that you understand exactly what you're saying. So you're not overwhelmed by one perspective that, frankly, is honestly not true on the side of the transgendering, especially of children. I'm mostly concerned for the transgendering of children, because I'm like, if you're an adult and you want to do that to your body, well, I care about you as a person, but that's your choice. But if you want to do this to a child, that is child abuse in my mind. And honestly, we're going to see people get arrested. We're going to see doctors and psychologists, psychiatrists and pediatricians. We're going to see people arrested in the future for the actual. It's going to be worse than a molestation of a child. So I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your work. I appreciate your brilliance. Thank you for living in California, which is the state I was born in, the state all my children were born in. I plan to stay in this state. I want to be like Caleb. I want to drive that demonic spirit out of our state, frankly, out of our country. And I am thankful for what President Trump is doing in this area. And I've even watched our governor make some, a little bit of positive statements about the transgender, competition. And I'm like, okay, well, it's there's this little spark of hope that's growing in our state. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah. There's definitely changes in the air in the nation under this topic. And I'd just like to add, and you can cut this later if you want, but I would just like to add, my issue with the adults now is that we have men who are transitioning to female, and in the space of labor and delivery nursing, perinatal nursing, men are thinking that they can breastfeed children, which I believe is abuse, because it is not the same. And we have organizations saying that forced lactation from men is the same nutritional value as a woman's breast milk, and I absolutely disagree. And so that is concerning, and to me that is child abuse. And then we also have articles coming out about women who will be taking testosterone while pregnant because they have gender dysphoria. And testosterone is very harmful to a developing fetus. And the fact that we have medical professionals, researchers who are putting research out there promoting this kind of harm, again, that is bothersome to me. So I do think that this does extend a little bit into the adult population and medicine as a whole, and the medical commitment and oath to do no harm when medical procedures cause harm to healthy bodies. Because like we talked about earlier too, these children, if left to develop alone, they're healthy bodies. These are not unhealthy bodies that are undergoing medical procedures
Yeah.
and medications and hormones. These are very healthy children that are then made very unhealthy. I
Yeah.
think that's an important point. And so, and the same is true for the adult population, but especially in our children when we are taking a very young, vulnerable, healthy body and we are making it very unhealthy. But I appreciate coming on the show. I appreciate the conversation. I thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the show. I'd love to meet you sometime.
Yes.
We're just a few hours apart and we're kind of circling the same orbit. So likely we'll meet soon. Love to meet your husband and your kids. And thank you so much for being on. You're such a dynamic speaker. You're so brilliant. And this is a tough space to work in every day. So thanks for doing that.
It's
Uh,
very tough.
Hey, if you're watching this, we want to just pray for you. God, we just thank you for everyone who will see this. We pray for parents and for children and for adults that would be in this space and somehow thinking about how to navigate this space. Lord, we pray that you would give them peace, that you would give them wisdom. You said in abundance of counselors, there's victory. Pray that you put wise people around them to guide them and their children through some of these very difficult topics, Lord. And we bless and we say, choose life. And we say, God, let life flow graciously and full of mercy here. And may for those who have transitioned, Lord, may you do miracles in them. And may you heal their bodies and heal their minds. In Jesus' name, amen.